Hello and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access Interview Series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and even more. I'm your host, Jim Andrews. Joining me on this episode to discuss how to get creative with new partnership assets, emerging sponsor categories, activation versus sales roles is Catherine Carlson, Senior Vice President of Revenue and Strategy for the Philadelphia Eagles. Welcome, Catherine, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jim, for having me today.
I wanted to start off because as we're sitting down, you recently wrapped up a sponsor summit for your partners, virtually, of course, this year. And that's something I've long been a proponent of those, hosted them, actually was part of an Eagles summit probably about 15 years ago. But I'd love to hear how this year's went for you.
So this year was interesting, and I've certainly hosted my fair share of partner summits over the years of my career, but this is the first time I've completed a summit 100% virtually. So that's a new one for the books. It was really fun. We had over 140 participants in the summit. So being on Zoom, you don't want to make it a really all-day affair. So we thought that a 3-hour time frame was probably the right time for the summit. And so we were really fortunate to have some incredible guests. We started off with the EVP of Events and Club Business Development at the NFL, Peter O'Reilly.
Sure.
Yes, he gave all our partners sort of an insight into the NFL and all the interesting events that he oversees. He oversees the draft, Super Bowl weekend. So really gave us some incredible insights into how the events look different in 2020 and also just the overall health and state of the NFL. So it was a really great story to share with our partners. And then we really had some other great speakers outside of giving some Eagles updates. We also had a unique guest, formerly headed up innovation and creativity and strategy at Walt Disney World. His name was Duncan Waddell. He was an incredible speaker. In fact, after the summit, I had 11 clients approach me afterwards and how can I have Duncan speak at one of my events? So that's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
And I think the key to any great summit, and especially even virtually, is to have breakout sessions and get into more meaty topics in smaller groups. So the one good thing about Zoom and the technology is the ability to break out into smaller breakout rooms. So I think our partners always love meeting other partners, and that's, I think, the key to success with a summit overall. So that was sort of just the key highlights. We also had a former player, Chris Long, talk to our partners about life after the NFL and his entrepreneurial efforts and business endeavors. So it really was a day with the theme being creativity and innovation. And it was a really, it was a successful summit, albeit virtually. Hopefully next year we're all back in the same room together and doing it again. So it was overall a great event for us.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I think you hit it right on the head too, that all of those elements are valuable, but just, for the partners to be meeting each other and sharing things directly. I think a lot of times we might expect, they might pick up the phone and reach out to each other, but obviously they've all got many, many things on their plates. And I've always found that unless, the partner, the team or the league isn't proactive about getting them together, it's not going to happen on its own. So you really need to be the catalyst.
Anytime you can bring your family of partners together, I think is a good thing for overall relationships.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm really interested in is when we think about the major pieces of the revenue pie for sports teams, you think media rights, tickets, licensed merchandise, and sponsorship. And when you and I talked a little bit earlier, you mentioned that for an NFL team like the Eagles, you've got a national TV deal through the league, you've got sold out games and a waiting list for tickets. So sponsorship really has the biggest revenue upside. And I thought that was really interesting. And so then it becomes a matter of, well, how do you capitalize on that? Because it's no longer about adding more signage. It's really about getting creative with new assets. And I'd love to hear how you and the Eagles are approaching that.
Yeah, look, it's a fortunate position that I'm in, overseeing revenue and sales when we have sold out games for every game. So we have very passionate and loyal fans. So, I think the Eagles are fortunate to be, in the fourth largest market in the country. The TV ratings are high. We have an incredible 10 million followers on social. So I would say that our traditional assets, such as signage, TV, radio, digital, they all drive tremendous value. But I think, as our industry evolves, as you know, being in the industry as long as I have, our partners are asking for more, that true ROI, that ROO, as I like to call it, a return on an objective. We're being challenged by our partners to sort of jump into so many different areas outside of what I would call traditional sponsor assets. So everything from sustainability platforms, digital fan engagement through our app, community and social justice platforms, paid social, segmentation of fans. Like, there's so many different elements that are out there. But I would say there's probably about 3 new areas, the sort of the new shiny toy, as you will, that we're focusing on and figuring out, okay, how do we turn these into to sponsorable opportunities. And the first one, which I kind of touched on with our summit, and you mentioned as well, is that a B2B platform. So the Eagles had not previously had a B2B platform. So that's a space that we're jumping into now. In fact, during our summit a couple of weeks ago, or last week, we actually launched a new B2B platform, and we're naming it the Eagles Business League. And so really, we want to leverage our 70 to 80 partners, our 200 plus suite holders. We have a lot of business decision makers. We have a lot of executives, and bringing them together under the banner of our business league is really something that we're excited to be part of. Under the business league, we're going to have 4 different pillars. One is, which I'm passionate about, is Women's Connect, connecting women in our industry and amongst our sponsors and suite holders. We're going to call one of the pillars Bird Talks. So that's when we bring in special guest speakers, like the one I mentioned for our summit, to talk about hot topics in our industry, to really, create a learning experience for our partners, but bringing them together. And then we're also going to do some lunch and learn series. We call them the huddles. And we're going to really focus on topics in sponsorship. So we might do a social media session, or we might do, talk about a new hot topic around legalized sports gambling, or new things that are happening in our industry. And then the final bucket is just that traditional B2B, creating events that brings our clients together. So we're really trying to create a platform and different verticals under that to really enhance it and bring our partners together, and hopefully they do business together. So that's the goal. So I think a B2B platform is something that, I think has a lot of sponsorable opportunities. But I think one of the hot things right now in our industry, particularly with the Eagles, is around our podcasts and content. Podcasts are just hot right now. Yeah. We just have such an interesting variety of Eagles podcasts, and they actually all appeal to different audiences. So I think most teams have like an X's and O type podcast, but we're really trying to appeal to maybe the casual fan. So we're going to have lots of different topics over the upcoming year. So we have 6 sort of regular cadence of different podcasts, and we're continuing to grow that library. It's something that we think is really a great opportunity from a sponsor standpoint. Just to give you a sense of the growth, since November of 2019, we've had more than 300,000 Eagles fans in the tri-state area that have started listening to our podcasts. And we've had over 1.5 million listens to our podcast. So you can see that this is something that's really going to continue to grow as podcasts expand. Everyone has a podcast now. Now we're just trying to find out what,
including this one. Yeah.
Exactly. What are the right topics and what interests people? So I think that's a really hot one. And then I think the final one, which I think is an interesting area of sponsorship, which I think is emerging, is through voice-enabled devices. So we've implemented some new technology and providing Eagles updates through your Alexa, Google Home devices. And so think about it. If you're waking up in the morning, You're grabbing your cup of coffee and you say, Alexa, I want this morning's Eagles updates. And so we're creating 1 to 2 minute pods of Eagles updates for our listeners. And so I haven't figured out how to monetize that yet, but I think it's a growing piece of our industry that is untapped at this time. So a lot of different things that we're focused on, but trying to uncover new opportunities for our partners.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, just the creativity there to go into those new areas. I mean, that's what's so important. That, as you say, that's what the partners are looking for, right? They want to be able to take advantage of that kind of really, something that's fresh and new, that's going to make people notice. We know another sign or something like that isn't going to really accomplish that in the same way these days. And just on the topic of the B2B, I think that's just such a smart thing to do. Been involved in some of those with NASCAR throughout the years, and I think you'll be amazed and surprised at some of the deals that actually do come out of that. You assume that some partners are going to get together, and then you start hearing about who they actually are, and you're like, I never even thought that the two of you would end up being, customers of each other or something like that. So,
and I honestly think NASCAR was ahead of its time. I always, I'm a student of the industry, and this was probably almost 7 or 8 years ago. And in my initial research when I worked at the Orlando Magic, we came up with this concept many years ago, but it was based on I think it was called Fuel for Business.
Fuel for Business. That's
set
right.
It up.
Yeah.
And it was just such a creative way to create formal ways of introducing their partners to each other and figuring out, are there other ways we could do business together? So I think NASCAR was the leader in the clubhouse with that whole B2B concept. And I think teams that aren't doing it are missing out on a huge opportunity to bring their partners together. It does add value, especially in lean times. If you can take credit for a connection, then they'll remember that when it's up for renewal. So, I think that's an important part of our business moving forward.
Yeah. We mentioned the draft, and along these lines of doing new things, doing virtual and digital content around that. Can you talk a little bit about what's planned for the draft for the Eagles?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's evolved, right? So if you talk about 2020, it was 100% virtual. The NFL had to reimagine their draft, and Commissioner Goodell was announcing draft picks from his basement.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, the creativity and innovation that was required to coordinate cameras in the homes of every general manager and coach and getting cameras inside the homes of potential draft picks, it was actually compelling TV.
Oh, it was amazing.
It was a nice change up, to be honest. And I think they had record-breaking viewership numbers. I think I remember reading that on ESPN, they had over 15.6 million viewers for the draft, day one of the draft. And it was at a time when there was no sport being played, right, in around the world. And so I think it was content that fans were craving, and it did really well. But I think it was a really incredibly innovative way to approach it. I think some of those innovations from 2020 are probably are here to stay. The NFL is planning on an in-person draft in Cleveland this year, but I think some of the virtual elements that were part of the 2020 draft, I think are here to stay. I think when you dial it down to the team level, we're doing a hybrid approach. So we're taking a hybrid approach. So we are actually inviting a select group of 3,500 fans to come down to the stadium, socially distanced, of course, with entertainment, music, special guests, and watching the draft up on the big scoreboards. So, I think that's kind of a fun element. And then we're also, from a virtual element, we're inviting all our corporate partners to have a sort of a private virtual draft party. And we're going to do it via Zoom, and we're going to feature one of our top draft picks from last year, Jalen Reagor. And he's going to talk a little bit like one-on-one about his virtual draft experience last year and how different it was to a normal draft. And, we'll have our on-air talent, some current players. Brandon Graham will jump in and talk to our clients. So we're really creating a more intimate virtual event for our corporate partners. And then we're also adding a little fun. We're sending a few gifts ahead of time so that they can enjoy their draft experience from home. So they'll probably get a draft hat and some sponsored snacks, of course, to make sure that their virtual experience feels like they're in a room with all their fellow partners. So yeah, so we're taking the hybrid approach, but I think some of the innovations from 2020 are probably going to live on both at the national level, at the NFL, and also at the team level.
Yeah, this is a really interesting time to be prospecting for new partners, just because you've got so many different industries that are in very different positions based on how they've come through the pandemic. Some have been able to thrive. Others were, almost completely decimated. What are you and your team there seeing in terms of kind of emerging sponsor categories that may not be on a lot of other people's radar screens?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah, if you want to share that, I don't know, maybe I'm asking.
Yeah, share our secrets. Well, our approach has been really continuing to focus on business categories or industries that kind of weathered the storm, the COVID storm, or have somehow benefited in a positive way due to the impact of COVID. There's a lot of industries that have fared well, and there's some industries that may no longer exist in 6 months. So, I think any industry that can assist in getting our fans safely back into stadiums or keeping our players, coaches, staffs healthy and safe, I think has been an industry that we've certainly pursued proactively. So think about categories such as cashless, touchless technology. So I will share a story. We at the Eagles, we're 100% mobile with ticketing. So we're ahead of the curve there, but we weren't cashless. It was something that we were contemplating, but we were a very cash heavy stadium, sort of more so than a lot of other markets. It's just unique to the Philadelphia market. And so, we may have taken a phased approach, and it may have taken several years for us to flip to a cashless stadium. But due to COVID, we flipped it from being a cash-heavy stadium to cashless in less than 4 months.
Wow.
So that industry and different vendors and players in that industry, I think, was an emerging category for us. Also, along with any cleaning type products, any health-related products, or any technology that allows the safe return of our fans, I think is an emerging category. And I think, and this may not be emerging category, but maybe a re-emerging category, I think alcohol.
Oh,
spirits and wine has been an interesting category for us. Not new, but emerging or bouncing back. And I think that primarily was due to bars were closed, and
right.
the at-home consumption was escalating. And so we actually signed a deal during this past season with a direct-to-consumer wine company. We co-branded, created some really cool labels, co-branded 3 different wine varietals, and they were a direct-to-consumer wine company, so they deliver the wine directly to the consumer. That did exceptionally well. So who would have thought direct-to-wine would be an emerging topic,
Right.
category. And I would also say spirits had a bit of a bounce back for the Eagles. We recently signed an agreement with Pernod Ricard under the Jameson label. And we didn't sell 1 drop of liquor at the stadium, yet we created a co-branded sort of a gift pack over the holidays. And the product sold out in the 3 tri-state area, and it was incredibly successful. So it just showed the power of the brand of the Eagles with Jameson, created a really unique partnership. So, there's some interesting silver linings to the alcohol category. And then I think anything delivery wise, because you need companies to deliver your groceries, your alcohol. So the Drizzlies, GoPuff, Postmates, Uber Eats, all of those types of those delivery type services, I think, have emerged as a very strong leader in different categories. And then the obvious one for us was legalized sports betting. emerging. It's been emerging for many years, but for us, it became a priority for us during this past year. Especially with the acceleration of legalized sports gambling in more states across the USA. I just think this category has exploded and will continue to grow as restrictions are loosened from a league perspective. But I think it really was a huge priority for us, and an emerging and growing category. It will continue to be a growing category across the industry.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. And then look, I think the final one, which was sort of something we jumped into for the first time, was around esports. For us, it's growing in popularity. And for us at the Eagles, it allows us to tap into a new generation of fans. So, when we were initially researching this space, we found that the amount of new EA Madden players was growing exponentially in this market. And so it was an area, an emerging category that we had not fully explored. And so we partnered with an esports gaming platform that will help us run in-person and online tournaments, and really attracting that younger audience. Because at the end of the day, the 13 to 34-year-olds now are going to be our season ticket members in the future, and they grow in the fan funnel and become, great prospects for season tickets, merchandise, and engaging with our brand. So we think that's an emerging category that will continue to grow.
Yeah, and that's the topic of, we could explore that for hours about how do you capture those young fans, and it's a conversation I think everybody's having in our business, and an important one. I love the Jameson example, because somebody there thought, oh my gosh, what have we done? We've signed the sponsorship, and now there are no fans coming to the stadium. This, our first year is probably going to be a bust, and it turns out to be, very, very successful. And as you said, I mean, it proves the power of sponsorship, right? Even really without that live event experience, which we know is it's crucial, it's important.
Well, and I think one other category that you're probably reading about in Sports Business Journal and in media every day is probably around cryptocurrency and NFT. Like, I think I'm still learning this particular category. I think we're taking a crawl, walk, run approach in this category, but I think that's going to be just one of these interesting categories in the upcoming year that I'll be curious to see how the NFL proceeds. I think the NBA has done some fun stuff around Top Shot, I think it is.
Top Shot.
I'm going to say it correctly. So I think there's some really interesting developments in that category. So we will continue to monitor it, as I'm sure you will. see where it lands across all the different sports and across entertainment, art, a lot of different categories.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. It's going to impact ticketing as well as merchandise and collectibles, and I was just educating myself on gas fees, so which is something I'm like, why are we talking about gasoline? It has nothing to do with gasoline. It's it's just an element of crypto and NFTs that I had no idea existed. So I think every day we're getting a little bit smarter about what that is. Lots to come there. Before I let you go, Catherine, I really wanted to ask you about, and I don't often explore people's backgrounds on this podcast because we're kind of known for, hey, we do quick hits and we don't talk about how you came up and all that kind of stuff. But I did want to go there with you because I think it's very interesting. You've had revenue responsibility and revenue generating roles at Disney. You mentioned you were at the Magic for quite a while, and now with the Eagles. But you also have spent time in partner activation roles. And to me, I think a lot of times in our industry, those tend to take a back seat to the business development roles. And I think that's very unfair, but I've seen that in at least in some organizations. And I'd love to know what your kind of perspective on that is, since you've been in both roles, and in particular, if you have any advice for somebody who may be in an activation position but ultimately wants to achieve a position like the one that you hold now.
Yeah, that's a question I get asked quite often. I think every organization structure and the skill sets within the team members, are a little bit different. So there's not a one size fits all structure for corporate partnership departments across our industry. I've had the good fortune, as you mentioned, of working on both sides of the equation, in activation and business development, and also had the opportunity to lead in both areas. But it probably does make me a more well-rounded leader, as I literally understand both sides of the equation. So I think in an ideal world, the activation team has a little sales DNA, and it's built into their everyday dealings. I like it when I see an activation team that takes on a more agency style approach, as they work day to day with the client. They understand their business from top to bottom, they understand their objectives, and that allows them to uncover new opportunities. So there's a little sales DNA in every person who works in activation. Sometimes they just don't know it. So for me, a super strong activation team can not only execute a partner's vision, but I think they can manage renewals. And that really allows the sales team to focus on new net business. So that that hunter, like, go out and get new business, and not get caught up in all the weeds. I truly strongly believe that if you have a strong activation team, you're essentially doubling your sales force. I can tell you that, I've nurtured multiple activation staff and realized they probably had a lot more DNA than they even realized. It was just, having them know that they had that sales DNA, and allowing them to jump the fence and into business development. And I've seen them really succeed and do well because they understood both, okay, if I sell this, how does that impact activation and the execution of the contract? And then I've also had activation team members that have led sales efforts for naming rights deals and jersey patch deals. So there really is an opportunity for activation to take on a more salesy role without the word sales in their title. I don't think that really matters. So my advice for any aspiring activation manager or director is, never stop learning. Be a student of the industry, learn about your client's industry, listen to your clients, understand their objectives, and act like an agency. Be creative and create new ideas. It's what I call consultative selling. Yep. So activation staff can quite often be the best consultative sellers out there. And, I think that opens a lot of opportunities and provides significant value add to the overall corporate partnership department. So, it comes down to skill sets and how does your leader give you opportunities to sort of just uncover that sales DNA. It's probably there. It's just maybe it hasn't been uncovered or nurtured. And I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for activation type sales to grow in their roles.
Catherine, I can't thank you enough for being with us. I so appreciate that, as you said, you're a student of kind of the history of our business. For someone who's often been in a professorial role, I appreciate folks like you that really take the time to look at what other folks have done and best practices, and that's what we're all about with this podcast and with our All Access community, is sharing those stories. And I think you've shared a great deal that will benefit everybody who listens and watches to this. So thank you so much.
And thank you for having me, Jim. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you today.
Likewise. And on behalf of everyone at Ticket Manager, thank all of you for watching. And please join us again for the next episode in the All Access interview series.